guys, it's Sarah, and today I have my November wrap up. November was not as good as I wanted it to be. I was hoping I could get to more books this month, but it just didn't quite happen. I did read 7 books, and I did end up DNFing 1. And so it wasn't like terrible, but it also wasn't the best month I've had. All right, so starting off, I did try a chapter tag where I tried the first chapter in some of the books that I have purchased from the Dollar Tree. And I picked a book from there and I went ahead and read it, and that was The Shining Girls, and this is by Lauren Bukes. And I really enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it 4 stars. This follows a man who is a serial killer, but he's also a time traveler. So he figured out how he can travel through time, and he can kill these girls who he calls his shining girls, because when he sees them, he has like a sense of knowing that they are supposed to be his victims, and these are the ones that he is supposed to take their lives, and they actually have kind of a glowing shimmer to them when he sees them. And he's able to travel through time, which means he's never caught, because by the time their bodies are even found, he's already in another time. And it also follows a girl who was supposed to be one of his victims, but she ends up surviving. And he leaves before he realizes that she's still alive. So she survives his attack, and then she is going on the hunt for him, trying to figure out who he is and what's happening and all this stuff. I really, really enjoyed it. It was a really nice surprise. And like I said, I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was great. I did listen to some of the audiobook as well, and the audiobook is really good. It was well done. And yeah, nice surprise. And then the next book I read was The Lying Game by Ruth Ware, and this was one that was being read by Lisa's book club, which is on Goodreads. It's called Lisa's Buddy Reads, and I'll leave a link down below if you guys want to go and check it out. But it's Lisa from the channel Books and Smiles, and I think they actually read this in October, and I was a little bit late to the game. I did start it in October, but I had to put it down for a little bit, and then I went back and I finished it in November. And this was my first Ruth Ware book, and it was fine. I didn't love it overly. I gave it 3 stars. I don't know, something about it, the ending bothered me. I did not like the ending. I didn't feel like there was any real character development. I felt like the characters kind of stayed the same, and they fell into their same patterns, and they never really learned any lessons from what was happening. I did like the overall plot, and I liked what the lie was based around. I thought that was very interesting, and the dynamic between the characters was really good as well. But I don't know, there were a few things that really, really irked me. And the main character, she made some decisions that just made me go, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? And yeah, the ending drove me nuts. I did not like the ending at all. I just felt like none of the characters really learned any lessons from what they were experiencing and what happened, and that drives me crazy, because when something like that happens, you should learn a lesson, and they didn't. So 3 stars. And then the next book that I finished was actually a book for my local book club here, and that is 13 Minutes by Sarah Pinborough. This is the book that we read. And this month our prompt was to nominate a book that is written by an author who shares the same first or last name as you. And I ended up nominating this one because Sarah, and then it ended up winning. So I was really happy about that. This was fantastic. We all loved it. Everyone in book club, we all read it. We all really, really liked it. It was a great discussion. This is a young adult thriller, and it follows a trio of friends who are called the Barbies. And it's very reminiscent of Mean Girls. And, you know, the girls in Mean Girls who are called the Plastics, these are called the Barbies. So it's kind of the same concept. And it also follows a girl who used to be friends with kind of the leader of the Barbies. They were friends when they were little, and they grew apart as soon as they started getting older, and kind of became almost enemies to a point. And they end up finding themselves in the woods one night, and the main girl, who is the leader of this pack, ends up in an icy river, and she ends up dying for 13 minutes, and then she is revived and brought back to life. However, she can't remember anything. She doesn't know how she got into the river. She doesn't remember who was with her, but she knows that she was not suicidal, and she knows that it wasn't an accident. She didn't accidentally fall in. So someone pushed her in, and it was intentional. And you spend this whole time trying to figure out who did it, why. There's multiple suspects, multiple reasons for these suspects, and it was just so interesting. I spent the whole time not really knowing what was happening. I felt like maybe a little bit more than halfway through, I started kind of having my suspicions and all that. So it was a little bit predictable. Like the further you read, the more things start unraveling and you're like, oh, wait a minute. And you kind of start figuring out what's going on. And that's pretty much what happened, but I still really, really enjoyed it. And then the ending, the last chapter. This is my second book by Sarah Pinborough, and the second book where the last chapter just made me go, what? So I hope that's a pattern with her, because I definitely want to pick up more by her and just to see what else she's written, because this is my second one by her and the second one that I've loved. I gave this one 4 stars. Okay, the next one that I read actually finished up a duology for me, and that is The Rose and the Dagger by Renee Ahdieh. This is the second book in the Wrath and the Dawn duology, and I really enjoyed this book, guys. I didn't like it as much as the first book. I liked the first book a little bit better. This one took quite a while for the action to start picking up, but once it did, it was really good. It just took a while, and there was kind of a different storyline happening from the beginning of the book, you know, going on. So we got introduced to a new character, and it was like, oh, okay, wait a minute, hang on. And so it was very different in that way, but it was still really, really good. I really just fell in love with these characters and just rooted for them so hard. And yeah, some things happened in here that really shocked me, and I loved it. This is one of my favorite duologies. It was fantastic. I think it's considered like a fantasy duology, and I loved it. I loved it. It was great. The first one I gave 4.5 stars to, and this one is a 4-star. And then I read the second book in a trilogy that I'm going to be doing a full trilogy review for here very soon as I read the third one. Haven't quite got there yet, but I read Remember Yesterday by Pintip Dunn, and this is the second book in the Forget Tomorrow trilogy. And this is a dystopian world where, it's so hard to explain if you haven't read it. But basically, your future is dependent on future memories that you have. They've created a way where they can hook your brain up to a machine and it will show you a future memory that you have. So something that has not happened yet, it's going to happen in the future, and it kind of determines your path in life. And some people get really good ones. Some people get really bad ones. And the whole point of it is to prevent the bad things from happening. So if you get a future memory from yourself that shows you killing somebody or robbing a bank or committing some, terrible crime, they can actually take that memory and use it against you and lock you up so that that event never happens. So they're trying to prevent like future crime and future murders and all that stuff. Ooh, however, this government is so bad. You want to talk about bad governments? This one is terrible. They just want full control. They have an ultimate agenda that nobody knows about. Everyone just trusts them and, believes in what they're doing, and it's not what they think it is. And this one actually, since it's the second book in a series, it follows a different character than the first book did. The first book followed a girl named Callie, and, she goes through all this stuff and a lot of things happen and something happens at the end that was pretty big. This one is a continuation of the story, but it is 10 years later and it follows her little sister. So it's, different main characters, even though Callie is still in this book, she shows up, but you do need to read the first one to read this one. It's not one of those things where you can jump in here and read this one. You have to read the first one first because a lot of stuff in that book is referenced in here, so you won't fully understand it. But I loved it. I thought it was great. It was a good read. I ended up giving it a 3.5. I didn't like it as much as the first book, and I think mainly because when you switch main characters, it gets a little like, okay. But it was still really good. I really enjoyed it. I like the storyline. I like the characters a lot. And yep, so 3.5 for this one. And then I ended up DNFing a book, and that book is So Much Pretty by Kara Hoffman. This came off of my book outlet shelf. And I got halfway through this book. It's actually not very long, but I couldn't follow it. I don't know why. It jumped around so much, and I read half the book, and the only thing I can tell you is that a girl goes missing, but it's not even the main character. But I don't know, even halfway through, I don't know how the main character even related to the person who's missing. And her parents were teachers, or doctors. See, I have no clue. I have no clue. I got halfway through and went, I have no idea what I'm reading. I couldn't follow the characters very well. And I don't know. I don't know what it was. It was so strange. And I was concentrating on it. I wasn't, like being distracted or doing anything like that. I just couldn't follow it very well. And then halfway through I went, I don't care about this. I really don't care. I don't even fully understand it. So I just went ahead and DNF'd it. And then there was a buddy read that I did with Lisa from Books and Smiles, and we read Air of Fire, which is the third book in the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. And we both really enjoyed this one. This one, we both listened to it on audio, and the audiobook was really good. It was really, really well done. So going forward, I might listen to these versus reading them. It just goes, a lot faster. And the narrator was great. But this one was definitely not my favorite in the series so far. I think my favorite right now is Crown of Midnight, which is book number 2. I loved that one. But this one took quite a while to get to the action because it's still following Selena. It follows Selena throughout the whole thing, but she has gone on to a different place in this kingdom. So you're kind of getting more world building in this one. So you're learning about a new place, and there's some new characters because she's in a different place. So there's different people there, and you're going back and forth between them and then what's going on back where she's from. So it's, it kind of goes, here's what's happening over here, here's what's happening over here. So we still get all of our favorite characters in here. But this one just, it took a while to get to the actual meaty action of it. But once it did, done. Like, once she hits her action parts, they're so good. It's worth getting through the slower parts in order to get to the action parts in these books. This one did take almost halfway through, though. Like, it took quite a while to get to the really good action-y parts. But the last 100 pages in this were primo and fantastic and shocking, and I called Lisa and went, oh my gosh, it was so good. So this one I only gave 3 stars to, and that's the lowest rating I've given a book in this series so far, just because it wasn't my favorite, and it did take quite a long time to get to a point where I was, not wanting to put it down. It took longer than the other 2 books did. But Lisa has started the next book, which is Queen of Shadows, and she told me it jumped right into the action. So I'm like, great, because I don't have room on my TBR for that right now. But hopefully really soon, maybe January, I'm going to be getting to the Queen of Shadows if it's going to jump right in. But yeah, so I'm really, really happy I finally got this read. It's been sitting, looking at me for so long, and I'm really happy that I finally picked it back up and got back into it. Okay, so now we are going to talk about the books that were on my TBR for my birthday reading project, because I had 3 books picked out this month. The first one was Gray, and that is written by Pete Wentz, and this one I am currently reading. I am about 60% through it. According to my Kindle, I only have 2 hours left, so I can finish it up this weekend, like no problem. I will have it finished. This one I'm enjoying. It's going a little bit slower than I was expecting, but it also, when I started reading it, it really surprised me. His writing is not what I expected. I wasn't expecting much. I'll be completely honest. I wasn't expecting it to be like wonderful and, lyrical and blah, 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 because he's a guitarist in a band. So I wasn't expecting, fantastic writing. I was pleasantly surprised though. His writing is very poetic. And the more I read and started reading some of these lines, the more I realized these sound like song lyrics. He's a songwriter. So it makes sense, that he would write that way. And I'm happy about that. I'm happy it's not just like mediocre writing. So I am enjoying it. Like I said, I'm only 60% done, so I can't, give my full opinions yet, but I am enjoying what I'm reading so far, and I will definitely have that finished up this weekend. I also picked out The God Box by Alex Sanchez, and I have not started that one yet, so I'm going to be rolling that over into December. So it will be up next after I finish Gray. I'm going to kind of go in order. But so yeah, I haven't read it yet, but I will in December for sure. And now let's talk about the third book and the last book that I read in November. And it's the third book on my reading project for my birthday that was recommended to me. And I buddy read it with Andy from It's a Reading Thing. Okay. This book, you guys. Oh, this is one of those books where you read it and you just, like, it takes your breath away. This book took my breath away. That's The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. And now I have to try to find words to accurately describe this book, and I don't know if I can. I'm gonna need a minute. So, plainly speaking, this is one of the best books I've ever read. It is up there in my favorites list of all time. This book blew my mind. I sat there and just, number one, this is a big book. This is the paperback edition, so it's longer than the hardback, but this is 564 pages. I was never once bored. Never bored, ever. The story was so engaging and so heartbreaking in so many different points and in so many different ways. Okay. So I'm going to tell you as much as I can, but most of this book you need to go in not really knowing what's happening, because if you go in here knowing things already, it's going to ruin it. And there's just so many little surprises in here. So many things I didn't see coming. So the basic premise is that this book is set in World War II, and it is set in France, and it follows two sisters who are adults, and they are dealing with what Germany is doing to France. So they are, living in a time where Germany was coming in and occupying France, and they were taking over. And you see them trying to survive, basically, because so much happens in here that I didn't realize would have been a reality back then. I'm still learning about all this stuff. This book, like I said, is now one of my favorites of all time. I will reread this again, like in a few years. I'll probably pick it up again and reread it. And I can't say enough about it. I really can't. I think everybody should read this book. Like, everybody, whether historical fiction is your genre or not, read it anyway, because you're going to be engaged. You're going to care about these characters. You're going to care about what's happening to them. Oh my gosh. Okay. I loved it. Obviously, 10 stars. All right, guys. So that is it. That is what I read in the month of November. And I was going to do a separate Tome Topple wrap up, but I don't really feel like I need to do that. I just talked about the two that I read, which is Air of Fire and The Nightingale. Those were both over 500 pages, and those are what I read for the last 2 weeks. So that's going to be it. I don't want to do a separate video. Let me know down below what you read in November. Did you have any surprises that ended up being one of your favorite books you've ever read like I did? Or did you have any duds where you DNF'd? Or just anything you were super disappointed in? Let me know all that stuff down below, and I will be back tomorrow with my December TBR. Hope you guys have a great day. Bye!